Hey everybody, welcome to Low Friction Friday. Hope you've been having a great week. And yeah, thanks as always for a lot of excellent comments, questions and input on last week's vids. So yeah, some of them were fantastic. So I enjoyed chatting with you on those quite a bit. And all right, yeah, today, so I have covered this topic before around, should you be faffing with removing your chain from your immersive wax pot at a cooler temperature to lock in as much wax as possible? Or are you fine to just remove the chain at just the normal re-wax temperature of, say, somewhere between 75 to 90 odd degrees? So yeah, I have covered this and my thoughts and the reasons for my thoughts in previous videos, but that will, like too much of my stuff where I was trying to cover, many topics in the one long video will have been lost in amongst all that. So since this particular topic has strangely come up a bit recently, I thought it's time for it to just have its own standalone little vid and we can have a good chat about it. All right, many things that we either do or consider doing, we will often, or we should be, I guess, assigning some level of what's the either definite reward, likely reward, or is there potentially a reward but it's a bit iffy, versus how much pain and effort are you going to need to go through. So if it's a lot of pain and effort for a potentially very iffy, unproven reward, it may not be worth it. If it's very low effort for a proven high reward, then often it's really worth it. So in this particular case, what we have is, like if there was absolutely zero pain, faff, or cost to trying to lock in as much wax as possible, if there's, I guess, nothing to lose, and even if it's an completely unproven potential gain, so it's just in the theoretical possible there's a benefit gain scenario, then why wouldn't you, go and have at it? But unfortunately, there is going to be some level of faff in most cases and some level of, cost or pain associated with trying to lock more wax in as, or as much wax in as possible. And we are in a situation still where the supposed benefit has not been substantiated by anyone that I'm aware of. So yeah, just for fun, since I can't remember when I last brought in a weird analogy example, but I love to do that where I can. Let's say you're working in a large office and management say, look, we believe that in general people are not hydrated well enough and that's affecting concentration and worker performance. We would like everybody to drink a little glass of water every hour. Very low pain factor. You're probably not going to be asking for what tier 1 clinical trials are backing this particular advice. You'd probably just go, you know what, I should probably drink more water. That's cool. If, however, management go, we've got information that says that if you just, your first wee when you get up in the morning, pee into a bottle, bring that in every hour, we want you to have a shot glass of that first wee that you took that day, you're probably going to want to ask for the clinical trials and studies that show that there's an actual benefit to doing this. The whole, again, that pain versus reward ratio then becomes a fair bit higher than if you're asked to just, drink a little bit of water. Okay, so what are the supposed benefits of removing your chain from wax that is cooler? So the concern that some have is that if one is to remove the chain from their re-wax temperature of, say, 90 degrees or 80 degrees or whichever it is that you're waxing at, that too much wax is going to run out of the chain at that temperature and you're going to have less wax inside your chain for when you start heading off cycling, and that you'll then have a lesser treatment lifespan from that wax treatment. So obviously, conversely, the proponents for letting the wax cool down to, ideally close to when the wax is starting to solidify. Obviously, you can't remove your chain from your wax if it's gone solid. So the practice is to, when you start to see the wax skin over or getting near to that point where you can see it's obviously getting quite cool, take the chain out to lock in as much wax as possible. And so the benefits of faffing around doing that are to have as much wax inside your chain as possible, and thus a hopefully longer wax treatment lifespan for that re-wax. Okay, so there are a number of downsides to trying to get this potential benefit. The first one for most is going to be faff time. So whilst there are some pots out there which help you with this, in most cases, what people are doing is from the general, higher re-wax or temperature they're using to effectively re-wax the chain, which will normally be somewhere around, say, the 90-degree mark as the sort of, the general optimal re-wax temperature. They're then wanting to cool that down, so that means turning the pot off and pretty much standing there with a thermometer until it's getting down towards the sort of 65-degree mark, and then removing the chain. That adds some significant time and faff to your immersive wax experience, and obviously just from a general perspective, it helps the immersive waxing naysayers bang on about just how much faff immersive waxing is when it really shouldn't be. Next, and this is really especially for those running, a proper good commercial wax as opposed to if you're using just cheap candles, but there's going to be a cost component. So you will remove much more wax, each re-wax, from your pot than if you remove it at, say, around 90 degrees where the wax viscosity is much thinner and much more is, less is going to stick to the outside of the chain, and B, more is going to run off the chain back into your pot during just hanging it to set over your pot, as is general best practice. If you remove it at near the wax's set temp or quite cool, you're not only whatever the theories around how much more you're holding in the chain, you're also going to be getting at least that theory happening on the outside of the chain. So as you saw from like a bit of an image there, you will be removing more wax out, and a lot of that will be staying on the outside of the chain. So over X number of re-waxes, for sure you will see a difference in the rate at which your wax level is diminishing in the pot by removing at a cool temperature versus just removing at the normal re-wax temperature. And if your wax is expensive, that will absolutely add up to X cost. Next, it's going to be mess. All that wax stuck on the outside of the chain is going to go somewhere as soon as you reinstall the chain onto your bike and start pedaling. Most people are doing this inside because they store their bikes inside. So after they've done a re-wax, they reinstall the chain, they do some initial pedals, and a whole bunch of excess wax will flake off. It will be a whole lot more when you have a whole lot more wax on the outside of your chain. And linked with that, you can increase quite notably any wax buildup that you might be getting on, say, the sides of your cogs, met cages, pulleys, things like that, just because you've got wax sitting on the outside of a chain that wants to come off. It's not going to really stay there, especially as soon as you start shifting. So it can for sure increase the rate at which you get a wax build up on things, which in normal re-waxing is very slow and extremely easy to maintain. Normally just the very periodic brush of your cogs and bits with a stiff nylon brush. You might find yourself doing that more often if you are going the lock-in with your cool waxing approach. And lastly, it is the initial break-in time. So you could notably increase the length of time it takes to break in your freshly waxed chain if you have removed it from wax that's quite cool versus removing it at a normal re-wax temperature. So especially if you're in cold temperatures, you're more likely to notice a much extended break-in time for going down that path versus just re-waxing at what I will say is a sort of a normal best practice. All right, so the main theory against is that due to the pressure loads inside your chain being literally well into the tens of thousands of PSI, that after your normal break-in of your wax treatment post-re-wax, so once you've got that wax treatment to its sort of optimal fast place, which for we'll just say normal re-waxing in normal temperatures, it's going to be around about 30 minutes is just the sort of general expectation as to when your wax treatment should be fully broken in, ready to race if you're racing, or just that's when it's going to be right zinging along in just your normal cycling. So at that stage, due to those extremely high pressure loads, and I mean tens of thousands of PSI really is a lot, the odds that you can get a thicker wax layer bonded onto those parts in those pressures by having more inside the chain to begin with, let's just say it's not substantiated, and that there are numerous others in this space, so this is not just me being Robinson Crusoe, that I guess find it extremely doubtful that that is taking place, at least to any measurable degree. I'm not aware of any testing at all that has substantiated that locking more wax in does in fact lead to any greater performance or greater longevity from a wax treatment versus removing it at, say, 90 degrees Celsius as a normal best practice. So, will more wax run out of the chain at the higher temperatures versus the cooler temperatures? Yes. But is that of any concern? So my belief and others is no, because you will still have more wax inside the chain, no matter how much runs out, than what the chain can physically hold. You are still going to have excess pressed out of all of your chain links as soon as you start breaking that wax treatment in. If excess is still being pressed out, then you do not have insufficient wax anywhere on any parts due to more wax running out from inside the chain. You just have less excess. Backing that, so bear in mind, I have been personally re-waxing now across many different types of cycling for over 150,000 kilometers. I've been doing this for a while, and I've been obviously fairly avidly tracking my chain and component wear for quite some time. And I have been, especially in the early days, I didn't have an indoor spot to re-wax it. I was re-waxing outside. And so I would be removing chains from the pot at, say, 90 degrees and hanging to set sometimes on like 40 degrees Celsius days. So I'm giving it the best case scenario to try to have too much wax run out of the chain. And have I ever noticed any difference in wax treatment longevity doing that versus, say, waxing in winter, whereas also having to do that outside, and the wax pot would not get to as hot a temperature because the small slow cooker only has X amount of power, and when it's 6 degrees outside, it just can't get the wax as hot as when it's 40 degrees outside. And also obviously the chain is going to set much faster when I'm hanging it to set when it's 6 degrees versus when it's 40. And the answer is I noticed a difference in break-in time, I noticed a difference in the excess, but I certainly didn't notice any difference in the total treatment longevity, apart from you could maybe add 20 minutes onto it for the extra 20 minutes it took to break in. The other thing that I've never been able to see is, say, if wax was running out of the chain too much, you would potentially expect that you're going to notice that in certain sections of the chain more than the other. So I'm hanging my chain up in, say, like a U shape over a bolt. So the wax is going to be running down lengthways on the chain until it reaches a point where it's cool enough it's not running out of the chain anymore. So you would expect that the ends of the chain are potentially going to have more wax in them than at the top of the chain where the wax is running down. If I had insufficient wax in those parts where the wax is running out, especially in the days where it's been hung up quite hot, then what I would expect to see over time, especially over the 15,000 kilometer lifespan of my chain, is a notable difference in the wear rate in sections of the chain. So those sections that are having more wax run out, you'd expect to clock up some higher wear over time versus the chains that are definitely having more wax locked in, because that's where the bulk of the wax is settled as it's set. That I have never ever seen. So having worn through in my 150,000 kilometers of waxing across mountain bike, gravel, road, time trial, cyclocross, you name it, my chains wear evenly all the time. all chains have a little bit of difference in their wear, but this is, it's pretty well random across the chain, and it's small. Certainly, if there was something to it over this time, I am pretty positive I would have seen some just notable differences in wear, especially towards the end of the chain's life, in the sections of the chain that have comparatively less wax locked in versus other sections. We haven't seen that. All right, so let's have a look at what's probably, I guess, the main information out there from a major manufacturer that runs contrary to what I've just been taking you through. So normally, obviously, Silca and I are normally in pretty well alignment on many things, chain lubrication and waxing, but we certainly do differ on this particular topic. So this particular blog post is looking at the theory around what temperature should you be removing your chain from the wax to lock more wax in as possible for longer lasting performance. So skip some of the stuff there. They've got a bit of a note here. They say that it's the longer lasting performance from locking as much wax in as possible has been anecdotally confirmed by our pro riders, employees and customers. I would like to basically put a caveat to that to say, look, I'd like to get that anecdotal from, say, some double-blind testing and see how well people's lifespan experience is matching up with the chains that were either removed cool or hot, and see what level of alignment they're getting. Also, Silca have access to some pretty fancy testing at their Purdue testing facility that they're using in conjunction with PhD students. I am certain they could test to definitively prove this or not. So their testing theory, so they have basically been waxing chains and varying temperatures and then seeing how much wax is retained, they say, in the chain. But to me, one of the mistakes is this that they're not ascertaining a difference between in or on the chain, and that's a pretty big difference to me. So testing different temperatures, so they tested at 3 different temperatures, so 75 and 95 and 125. So waxing chains at 75, the nuts and bolts are, so they've weighed the chains with, stripped, and then they've weighed the chains after the wax, and they've had a 4.2 gram increase over the baseline, removing the chains at 75. They have had at 95 degrees, that's, have they stated the actual amount there? So 0.5 gram or 12% less than was left in the chain. I gather that's versus that. So let's say 3.7 will do the maths for them. And then at 125 degrees, it's now a further 1.3 grams less versus the 75% chain. So again, they're saying it's about 30% less wax retained in the chain. But I just take exception to the fact that they haven't accounted for what is going to be left on the chain, as in on the outside of the chain, that is just going to cause more mess. So they've taken this experiment where they have not been able to ascertain the amount of extra wax in versus on the chain, and made a conclusion that all of the extra weight is inside the chain. They've also, drawn a bit of a conclusion that that extra wax is actually going to be there after the wax breaking, where your excess is pressed out. They're not drawing a direct correlation to the percentages and the percentage of extra or lesser longevity that you might get, but they are, at the end of the day, aligning this with their anecdotal evidence that having more wax in the chain is giving you a longer lasting lifespan. And I just think that, unfortunately, this particular test in this blog post is, in my view, not done well enough, and certainly is not accurate enough to draw a conclusion or a match between the anecdotal and what they're finding, with more weight of wax being both on and in the chain. So yeah, let's just say that as a study, that's not exactly tier one, and they have the equipment and the resources to do a tier one study. Again, I would just say I'm not Robinson Crusoe here. So whilst out of alignment in this case with Silca, I have been speaking with numerous others in this space for a lot of years now, even all the way back to obviously Jason Smith of Friction Facts, who really kicked everything off for the whole wax and chains and UFO. And there's, in general, a very large agreement around how are you going to get a thicker wax treatment after break-in when the pressures inside the chain are so high. After X time, say 30 minutes, we are basically going to be in the same place. You may extend it by another 10 or 20 minutes, and that is just going to be break-in time because you got more excess to have to get out in your break-in versus if you've removed it normally. But is an extra 10 to 20 minutes really classed as a longer lifespan extension for your wax treatment? Personally, I don't think that counts. So yeah, my personal opinion is, look, prove it. They've got the resources and equipment to be able to do so. Like if it was completely pain-free, no issues, just have at it. But there is a cost due to 4 different aspects to doing so. And if it's for 0 point in doing so, just more hassle, I just don't think this is something that should be continually out there in the sphere and continually debated that, yes, you should go and do this if all it is going to be is more cost, faff, mess, and break-in time. Number 1, prove it. Number 2, if it is proven, which would for sure I'd be surprised, but if it is proven, then would love to know the actual mechanism as to how that's managed to achieve that. But if it turns out that it's a 0.1% improvement in your treatment longevity from some precise testing, you got to weigh up, is that worth it? There, just wanted to quickly show you. So Optimized Bike do have a fairly fancy wax pot. Again, they do a lot of really good looking stuff. I got to say, I really like the look of this pot, and it does do something groovy. If this is still something that you are interested in, so this is an auto pot, so it takes it through stages where it heats it up to 90, and then after the waxing, it cools it down to 65. So this will at least save you the faff part of standing there with a thermometer. That's pretty cool. The Silca wax pot you can dial down to, I think, 70 as a minimum, maybe 75. So you can obviously just turn it to that and then come back sometime later. But this has a whole auto temperature heat up and cool down thing. Still going to be a bit of faff. For one, I disagree with this part. As soon as the target temperature is reached, a signal tone sounds. Now the chain can be inserted. Why wouldn't you still just put the chain on top of the wax as normal, so that as the wax heats up, as soon as the wax is melted enough for the chain to go into the wax, then the chain can heat up as well, and the old coating, whatever's remaining, melt off into the wax pot. One of the re-wax mistakes that people make is they heat their wax up to say 90, they put their chain in cold, they swish it around, and then they hang it to set. There just is not the time for the chain to get up to temperature and the old coating melt off, and they typically have a pretty poor re-wax experience. So, just put the chain on top of the wax, turn the pot on, and then whenever it's at 90, and swish the chain around. The other sort of faff part is what happens if you're not there and you don't swish it at that time because you've gone off and done other fun things, like you've gone to have a shower and have some lunch whilst you've got your chain waxing. Then you may need to run that cycle again. So potentially reducing some faff, potentially not all the time. Versus what I would say is best practice is obviously you pop the chain on top of the wax, turn the pot on, just go do stuff, come back whenever later when it's melted and up to temp, swish your chain around and hang it to set, and you are done and you are golden. But there we have it, a groovy pot trying to help you with this particular fun aspect is out there if you're interested. And again, it looks good. Sorry, to give them credit as well, it does have a manual mode, so you can actually turn that auto phase off if you like and just use it, what I would say is the better path. And yeah, just do it manually at 90 as opposed to doing that. So at least it does have the option for you to have a manual mode where you can control the temperature yourself, or the completely, in my view, unnecessary auto going down to 65. Alrighty, so as a wrap, like, I want you to have the best wax chain and drivetrain experience. If I believe that there was something tangible to this, that hey, as an option, if you are willing to put up with a little bit more faff and a bit more mess and a bit more wax loss and a bit more break-in time, but you're going to get X benefit that has been sort of tangibly ascertained, here's an option path for you. And yeah, if you're up for it, then it's a groovy thing to do. And obviously, I would love to be in alignment with Silca on this rather than out of alignment with Silca, because yeah, I prefer to be in alignment with good manufacturers doing a lot of good stuff in this space, and also one that obviously been working with for a long time. Alas, I just can't get there on this. It is something that I had certainly focused a bit on in the past in my own cycling because it's come up since forever. And I guess we're really at the point now where I'd love to not be going around in circles still debating this 3 years down the track and 5 years and 10 years. It would be great to kind of definitively see if we can notice a difference or not. So as always, testing side's really busy. It's hard to get the resources to try to test for this sort of stuff. I'll probably add it to the list for things if you want to vote in this as one of the next tests, where I can wax a chain, removing it at 65 degrees Celsius, and we can test its single application treatment longevity, see at what point we get that jump in wear, and obviously do the same wax, same model chain at, let's say, 100 degrees Celsius, so we have a pretty big temperature gap difference, and see if we notice and can get an actual longevity, treatment longevity difference between the two. Silca obviously would have the resources to do something similar, potentially even more accurately. They've got a machine that is measuring the efficiency losses. They could see a point at which the efficiency losses increase, and if that is sooner, doing it hotter versus cooler, things like that. I think it's time to, put this one to bed. And yeah, if you're wondering why haven't I just done this test already in the past, it's because I never thought I would need to. I've just always thought it was obvious enough that you would not be able to get a thicker wax coating after the break-in due to those enormously high pressures. So it's kind of been along the lines of, I don't need to test if riding into a brick wall is going to be fun or not fun. I kind of felt like I knew the answer to that question enough already, and happy to debate based on the merits of some sort of basic physics there. But this one just keeps coming up, and obviously when it's sort of also being supported by Titan in this space, by the likes of Silca, it does then take it to a spot where perhaps I have to ride into that brick wall after all to ascertain if that is a pleasant experience or not. And again, I'd just like to stress that this is not just an atom theory thing. This is I guess a basic sort of physics behind the enormous pressure loads thing that is also believed by others much smarter than me that have been titans in this space much more so than I, also believing that that is a fruitless path. So there's that as well. All right, that better do. Came out twice as long as I thought, which is about normal. All right, I will hopefully be back with another video on another topic, potentially again today. We'll see how the rest of the day goes. But otherwise, look forward to your comments and input as always. But yeah, hopefully I'll chat to you again soon.